So what it's going to be is, so my task is to ask questions, like maybe some initial questions that were prepared ahead of time, but it's also an opportunity for you to ask questions. So I will kind of alternate between my questions, and if anybody has questions from the audience, please. The goal is to the goal is to basically hear from people who are doing quantum computing about their path, how they ended up where they are in terms of their research, and also get some insights about what is like working in this area. So, but you should feel free to ask any kind of questions that you like, right? Okay. So my first question to you is, if you could just take turns and talk about your path and how you ended up in the quantum computing area. 5 minutes each maximum, please. And I know that Michael, you talked a little bit about it in your presentation, but some people weren't here. So maybe you need to start.
But if I go over, just tell me, or you can ask questions and just tell me. So my background in research is AMO, so that is molecular physics. I got physics PhD, and in the field they call it back then lasers and materials difference. After my thesis is working with materials that's backed up with the dye molecules in the polymers and CAD applications in let's say store certain type of hologram. So that's for expression of that. And after that, I'm working along the same way and turn my attention to rare earths, crystals, and doing applications in processing classical information carried by light. The underlying physics is interactive patterns and the light forces. So somewhere along the way, start thinking, okay, that atoms, right, should be bits, right, get the quantum computing domain, and that force, the laser force, was the make of the waves, right? And the other way around, and your base, your atoms could be just template to store the quantum information like carried by the atoms. That's how I get into the quantum information. It's quite, it's not like a transition. It's a gradual shift. But with that said, actually a couple of years ago, I took and jumped into so that is a big shift for me. But I've been always thinking back in mind when I shifted to the field, I always learn more about quantum information theory, algorithm, not for here yet. But that's not the question. Always interested. Like a couple of years ago, we started looking into it. That's actually developed by the time. What we have a quantum computer. They're not really good for any practical use. Okay. Now, what could be a better use of this existing machine? And probably is good. How to get into the algorithm, and now we do some several research projects around this field, and of course, in collaboration with my Michael, included, and with all the right fields from math, physics, and computer science, undergrads, and graduate students alike. Happy about the outcome of this whole least in our the right way I'm teaching that last semester, like so, my solution quantum space solution.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also that physics now pioneered the master's program in QSEC that means course is a core part of. That's the right way to say it.
Right. So that class, that course is co-listed physics, math on the undergraduate level. So you can see there's 300, 500, and 600 levels in math. You can take it as elective credits, but if you're in the physics master program with a quantum concentration, that's a required course.
Take a look at this as an option. If you're considering master's programs, we do have Jason master's in QISC. So talk to me if you want to learn more about the course.
Yeah, I guess that my description of how I got into this field is going to be somewhat less interesting than everybody else's. So when I was an undergraduate, quantum computing was becoming a field, but it wasn't a field yet. I mean, it was and it wasn't. In most universities, most places, it's not. So when I was looking to go to grad school, there wasn't really, the faculty from undergrad, whatever, they didn't really know very much about who was in the field, right? It's not like the experience that you all would have right now, where you can come to us and be like, oh yeah, these people all over. And so actually, I thought the closest thing was AMO physics. And so I actually landed at the University of Maryland. I tried my hand briefly at experiment, and after injuring myself one too many times, decided that my talents are really better served as a theorist, and so I ended up going not just into theoretical stuff, but all the way out into algorithms and mathematical physics and but basically I've just been studying quantum algorithms since I was growing up, for lack of better phrase. I don't have all that much in terms of names, because I did evolve that. So.
Okay, so my name is Tian, and I'm section professor this time. So I started to learning quantum algorithm less than 2 years ago. I went to college almost 30 years ago, majoring in computer science. So during my undergraduate study here, I really loved it. So even for now, after 30 years, I really think that I'm good at computer. This is not true. And then I went to Hong Kong to study where is communication during my PhD program. And then after 2 years, I went to India. During my master program, I work on think line computing. I'm not sure whether you have heard about that. And the first project that I did 20 years ago at Baume is to build up some virtual classroom. So you realize that I thought that if I were succeed successful at that time, then we may have another software replace doing it. But I transferred to another area. I transferred to study algorithms. And my experience by that time told me that if you are working on some engineering problems, and the challenging part is to make it work. You need to consider a lot of trivial stuff and make it work, or make something that is quite new. But if you are working on some theoretical problems, the challenging part is that you need to make your work better than other products. So both of the, no matter whether you are working on engineering or you are working on science, scientific problems, both of them, you may achieve different results. So I got my first paper published in 2005. And I got the result because I attended a seminar. A seminar like a class. So based on this one, I would like to suggest that any student, if you are a PhD student, if you would like to find out a research topic, reading papers is one avenue to do so. Attending seminars or attending any kind of workshop will also be beneficial to you. And then since I joined Mingzhen in 2007, and since then I worked on scheduling problems, online problems, and then converter optimization problems, trying to improve the existing results. And then at that time, I went to Black China for some reason just before COVID. And I stayed with my son, so I left and went back to engineering duty. And there was a post saying that it was going to giving a seminar on quantum computation. And then I think, okay, this is quite interesting. It doesn't hurt to stop by, so I went in that room. And I saw Maria's smiling face. Really welcoming. But I stayed in that seminar, and I think after 1 month or so, then after the spring break, then the campus closed. So, but Maria, I really would like to thank Maria for this one. She keeps sending reminders, emails about all the information about the seminar. That keeps me a little bit busy and just keep me safe because I would I think that currently that I'm comfortable of doing research in this area. And I read a lot actually in the past 2 years. And I learned a lot from Michael and from the seminar students. And I can see that this is the big area. There's a lot of unsolved problems. I hope that you enjoy that kind of stuff. And if you have business students, try to find out. And I do believe that there will be some big progress ahead.
Maybe questions emerged while we were listening? I think we can hear, by the way. Is it possible to hear? Like, Louis, you're at the back. Is it okay? You can hear? Any questions? Last question? So maybe we can just kill the noise.
That's the atmosphere. Moving the atmosphere. Can we just lower the volume of the fire?
Somebody's typing upstairs.
So this, I think, correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, perfect. So do let us know because we're here to talk to you. So if you cannot hear, it doesn't mean it. Okay. If there are no questions, I have another one. You keep hearing about quantum revolution or second quantum revolution. And during talks today, and Charlie talked about it, like there's skepticism about it, like that there are a lot of things which are uncertain. Maybe there's also a lot of hype right now about like how these technologies are progressing. So my question to you guys is like, how do you feel about this term? What does it mean to you? Do you feel that it's real? Do you feel that it's fake? Or anything that this term really means to it? Any comments on how you feel that how your perspective and how your experience affects your vision of where this is? You can go in any order. Whoever's ready.
I guess I'll start. You know, I don't love terms like quantum revolution or similar terms because they have kind of type built into them. That said, 10, 15 years ago, the thing that you often hear people saying is, oh, we'll have quantum computers in 5 years. We'll have quantum computers in 5 years. And this kept on happening. But the main thing that the shift that we've seen in the past, few years is it actually does appear that within a reasonable period of time, we're going to, maybe not have full scale industry ready, devices, but we will have, special purpose machines. It looks like there's some amount of fault tolerance already, I mean, not on the devices that are big that were described earlier, but for the experimental setting. And so this really is moving along, and it's moving along, I guess, much faster than I, or even the people around me predicted when I was working on my PhD. So I suppose at the end of the day, I don't think that it's hype. I do think it's going to happen. Some number of years ago, I would have said, I don't know, but now it really does seem like
Yeah, I definitely agree. I have the same kind of thing. A few years back, you asked me, I still don't have a firm answer. I still don't have a firm answer, but I'm moving forward to say, no, this is real, it's coming. And that's why I put that one sentence on my fire. That is the promise to the quantum state reunion that really like IBM last year. They said the quantum technology and specific quantum computation, that is no longer free. It's our destiny. So they are really targeted and geared towards their full force along that direction. We have some base to say that. For example, the roadmap Wayland showed us earlier. They have a roadmap, and the latest processor Eagle was last year as 100%. And along their roadmap, they are going to release 434 today, this year, not today, this year. And by next year, they will do more than 1,000 qubits, and they claim last year at the announcement, they are very well on to achieve that. And not only that, they also their in-the-air rates really. So the machine we're using right now is barely double nines, meaning 100% the air. Now they are achieving 3 numbers on their machine. So I think we right that right.
So, why should I do that? Yes or no? I would like to say that I'm working on some low-end you may not be able to build up the quantum computers like but based on the computing power like the IBM quantum computer for less task, what can we do? Can we do better than the current classical? So this is the question that I'm trying. I don't know whether it's in the near future or in the long term that we need to come up with a perfect quantum computers as what people hope for now. But if we do have quantum computers, what can we do? And even for like a 30 or 40 qubits, we can still make things better. And the current classical computers, they do have their drawbacks. So I'm not sure whether you know that the classical algorithm, even though we have a polynomial algorithm, so that the highest order is 10 to the power 5. And such kind of algorithm is not practical at all, even though it is make the solution faster with this one. Another one application of such kind of Jarret is like that. Or consider the streaming algorithm. We have to process a lot of data. If we do not have a sufficient amount of computers with sufficiently large memory system, most of the time such kind of job for us is infeasible. So the question is that is it possible for us to use just the exponentially fewer qubits to encode the information so that we can still beat the classical computer? We are not beating some other ideal model in our mind. We are just as long as we can use the quantum computers to beat the classical computers. I think it's a big progress.
I'd like to also add something. I mean, some of what I think motivates this question is like, oh well, if quantum computers never come to be, right? And maybe I'm wrong, and we don't have them. Are we doing all this for naught? And while maybe quantum algorithms themselves only run on only run on quantum computers. One thing that studying quantum algorithms, studying quantum computing has done and continues to do is gives us better classical algorithms than we thought were possible previously. So one question that you necessarily ask whenever you're working on algorithms is like, oh, this algorithm is better than the best known classical algorithm. But that's the best known classical algorithm. Is there a better class? Like, is this actually just better? Sometimes the answer is not really. But in order to answer the not really, you often have to find a better competitor for it. And right now, these things may or may not have huge use, but they have seen some use, including in industry.
So let's go into another question. So, are there a class of problems that are perfect for quantum computers to solve?
Yeah, I mean, I said no really flippantly. The reason I did that was because you could like every computer is a quantum computer, right? So in principle.
Do I need to repeat the questions to them? Because they will... Okay.
So I mean, you could in principle just run a classical computation. That said, like under certain assumptions about what you're actually doing with machine answers. And that's because of the way that the data.
We talked a little bit about some of the applications like photography and learning other applications that aren't very well known, but like
Quantum computing.
yeah.
Just general. I mean, there's these are kind of limited purpose devices, but probably one of I mean, if I had to like broad sweep, like right, say like there's a particular domain that people don't often think about, scientific computing, right, and that's a very broad thing, right? When I say scientific computing, I mean like numerically solving differential equations, solving systems of equations, simulating quantum chemistry is one of the major applications of that we in the community talk about, but it's not usually that. It's not usually something that's mentioned if you read a popular science article. But yeah, in principle, if you have a smart enough person who can figure out how to exploit it, so you can have applications for it.
Or you can insert
maybe I will just add, there seems to be a lot of development in biology and medicine right now related, like how to use quantum computing to search genomic databases and things like that, which seems to be very promising as well. Business.
To build on what you just said, I mean, Rover search, isn't a huge advantage. So Rover search is an algorithm that lets you search an unstructured database in times square root number of elements as opposed to number of elements. And so you can pretty much convince yourself that this basically means you have a quadratic improvement in almost everything you do, because very frequently, whatever it is involves searching. It's not earth-shattering or really the world's biggest deal, but
That's Rover Jarret.
Yeah.
Other questions that emerged, maybe?
One question I have is just, I'm just wondering, like, is there principle like a layer of abstracted people or specialized knowledge in other areas don't have to know as much the specifics of like quantum theory to get a feel to explain.
Sorry.
So can you formulate it in one, just one sentence? Allow us to-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Well,
Basically, I was just wondering, like, is there sort of, in order for like people like broad areas across like science and medicine, are they going to like, in order to be able to exploit sort of like benefits of quantum computing, will it be necessary for them to like have more in-depth knowledge of quantum theory getting into it, or is there like, sort of, will it be at least possible like maybe in the future to achieve like a higher level of abstraction, or like without as much.
That's way when Spock was about democratization. Right? So that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Maybe, and try to answer your question. I think I'm here, Michael, that has business background. So my background is just a curiosity. I haven't learned about physics since my graduate from my college. So when I just jumped into this area, and then I feel like there are a lot of things. So I actually read about same as like the third one. I stopped there, so it's much. And then I went to MIT to look at the YouTube video about the quantum mechanics, one, two, etc. And then I bought the algebra books. I also bought the books that use the books that. So I went on a very long class. And I'd like to give you the thing for now. If you have learned the algebra, so in order to learn about the quantum mechanics, particularly if you are comfortable saying like if some physicists feel that the quantum computer, I don't need to worry about how they make the quantum work. Then you don't have to know about the quantum. And you should be able to good at being an architect. And you should be good at some of the superconducting from plasma algorithm. So that means that whenever you consider the quantum algorithm, what is the measure? So like a running time that you're doing. And eventually, if you would like to know about the complexity, particularly there was the classic computer like P and P space or Q so some kind of stuff, and you need to know a little bit about those concepts, but you don't have to know about the regarding to this one, I read a few books. Whenever I stuck there for some time, then I try to switch to another book that I feel a little bit more. So next, I'd like to read the quantum algorithm via linear algebra published in last year. It's a pretty thick. It gives a little review about the linear algebra in the first 3 and 4 chapters. And then they talk about the basic quantum algorithm techniques, like what you may have learned from the classical algorithm textbook. And after that, I think that you further start to look at quantum algorithm.
Maybe I will just put a different spin on, because the question I think in part was, what about practitioners? Like, can they, not knowing anything, like you're talking about maybe about the person who is developing the algorithm, right? Like you are, right? But medical doctors don't need to develop algorithms. They want to use them. So I think, I guess maybe the question can be rephrased as, can we reach a point where people can just plug an algorithm, push a button, and get the results? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is. I think a few small companies nearby, they already developed some software for people in other areas, such that, for example, if I have such kind of simulation, I can have the software thing. So I don't have to know whether it's the Hawaii area or the stack. That like a lot of
So I guess I don't know if everybody in the room uses Mathematica, but maybe a large percentage of people do. If you're trying to run some code and you want to parallelize it, at least in Mathematica, you type parallelize and then you just write whatever you would have written anyway. If people like me do our jobs right, eventually there should be something that comes along where somebody at the practice level doesn't even really know what's making their code go faster. It just goes faster. But you could be asking a different question, right? You could be asking, what do you need to do research? And it really depends, or like, what do you need to do research level at some varying level of research? And it really depends on what your goal is, right? Like a lot of computer science papers, it'll almost be, there will be no real, not that many quantum states floating around. They'll just be like, oh, we have this algorithm and that algorithm and this algorithm and that algorithm. And it's put together in a sequence of like just theorem statements.
There's more for this.
Yeah, but at the end, but at the end of the day, I know the people who wrote that paper actually understand the underlying quantum mechanics, but in principle, you can imagine a future where you're doing research and just resting on work other people did and putting it together in clever ways, where maybe you never, I wouldn't recommend this, but like maybe you never learn the actual underlying theory or something like that. You just know that, oh, here's some facts I can put together.
That's a very detailed answer to a question from me. Any other questions? Okay.
So are there a class of problems? Are there certain notable problems that are really likely that would be reduced, that would be in the
No, we don't. Let's not believe that.
Yeah.
Like the Strauss algorithm to problem. People haven't found out that the problem is so for any problem that is so far, if there exists a vision of quantum solution, those problems are not very easy.
And there are people who understand complexity theory better than I do, who would tell you that there is good reason to believe that. I'm not qualified to say anything. A whole wealth of people where that's going to be studied.
So in I'm wondering like a computing feed. I think it's like quantum computing, but it's more so with just the transfer of data. it possible to use Plexum in such a way to transfer data much more quickly?
Well, basic component information. There are two types of qubits. One called matter qubits, that's the qubits in CD. And the other is the photonic or light qubits or light qubits. So that's the qubits that encode quantum information in the quantum space of the photons and send this to the qubits. So that's the way to do it. And besides quantum computing, building quantum machine.
So, so there's no way to like use quantum computing to send information faster than light.
So that's
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? And it's an entirely loaded question that we should probably not talk about right now. But you would spark a huge debate if you answer that question. However, you know, like
that will go back all the way to the foundation.
Yeah.
It's,
I mean, you can teleport information, and some people be like, "Oh, well, it teleports instantaneously," but it still takes. You're still bounded by the speed of light in terms of. So it's like there's yeah.
the answer is no.
No, it's a topic for another day. I'm happy to talk about it.
When you send information, whatever information, at speed greater than the speed of light.
Using entanglement. Yeah. No.
Whatever.
Right.
Patrick says no.
You have to have part of the thing with that is that it's a lot of popular.
Here we go.
All
Now
right.
you open it.
The idea that you're going to entangle particles right next to the line on Earth and someday else is it's not how it works. You actually have to have a classical channel connecting you and the person you're talking to with the entangled particle. It's still there. Otherwise, you can't like it's not like a cell phone.
They can receive the information, but they won't know what it means.
Yeah.
Like, but that's why I don't want to answer it, because like it's loaded.
It's more about creating keys than it is about, at least in my interpretation of quantum computing, it's really about creating secure keys. What it's about is the fact that if I'm trying to make a key with which I can talk to you, so that nobody can interrupt with getting the communication channel to it, so I know I can do that. With the quantum aspect of it is that if somebody's monitoring the key generation between the keys, if they're observing what we're doing to generate the key, they're conducting a measurement, which affects the outcome. And then when I compare my key with your key, statistics and error rates and so on will be different from what they thought. And that way we'll know that somebody was monitoring our communication channel. So that's really, at least I think what it's about.
As I said, this is a philosophically loaded question, and I think we should like it.
He thinks it's a good question for next time. Okay, so I probably will ask the next one. Maybe each of you can think of one project in quantum computing area that you're either most proud of or most excited about, anything ongoing in the past, just maybe very briefly. Don't go into too many details, but somehow, you know, so that people know a little bit about the work. Maybe we'll start with Faye, because he's getting bored.
Okay, so the current purpose could be you could do like a designing class algorithm for the problems, or you could design quantum algorithm. So one such kind of problem is like arbitrary problem. On that, they will go to the Wall Street and there will be a wall saying like what is those currencies and what is the currency exchange rates. So there's the rumor I heard from my friend, but they must be Wall Street, but I don't know whether it's true or not. So when you go to the Wall Street, your manager gives you $1 million and $1 million plus, and then you can play this money, and at the end of that class, then you you give your manager a return. So if the return is less than $1 million, you didn't pass the screening. So the problem is that given the currency exchange rates and given the currencies, you need to figure out a path to make the currency exchange such that you can earn money. Say like the product of all the rates is strictly rather low. So definitely this is the problem in the classic EPD classic. And the problem is for others. And the objective, most of the people trying to improve the algorithm based on studying the fluctuation of the rates, based on studying like prediction over the rates, they are going to make the algorithm. If you make a faster algorithm, then you keep your competitors, and then you earn money. So that is the very straight logic. So one way is that it's possible for us to design quantum algorithm to beat classical algorithms, such that you can earn money. So that is it. So you can convert this one so that the classical algorithm has dynamic programming procedure as a core. So is it possible for us to replace that core in the classical solution using some piece of quantum computation so that we can take it back? But just to give you some sense about the significance of this problem, I couldn't remember exactly, but I've heard that some people, in order to make their algorithm faster, they even consider the signal transmission from New York to Chicago, such that they build up an office in Chicago in order to make the algorithm, the same algorithm, a little bit faster based on the light transmission. So any small improvement over the timeline of the algorithm can make a big. So that is one application problem. You can think of designing classical algorithms for the same problem, improving your result over some other people, some other even much smarter people, or you could try to take a shortcut, designing a quantum algorithm in order to get a classical. And that you may not have the exponentially better classical algorithm, but as long as you can improve the performance.
So I guess one project that I've worked on at some point was when I was a graduate student, we discovered what appeared to be an exponential separation, the rate at which you can simulate some quantum systems on a classical computer, particular class of quantum systems, where the difficulty was how difficult it was. So we thought, oh, quantum algorithm can do this exponentially better. A few years went by, I kind of realized that maybe there was a better classical algorithm to simulate these things. And so, fast forward a couple more years, and eventually we were able to reduce the problem that actually generated the separation with, what do you call it? Separation between the quantum and classical algorithms to graph isomorphism. I can never pronounce that, graph isomorphism. And so then we came up with an algorithm based on the recent results on graph isomorphism. I think I'd be better at saying this by now. I've said it. To actually have a better classical simulation. So we showed that the separation was the most quasi-polynomial set of exponentials. Quite a difference.
So you prove classical algorithm.
Yes,
as a byproduct.
that's right. So we started by proving a quantum algorithm, and then I said, oh wait, maybe this thing that was pretty convincing once upon a time is not actually, or shouldn't be as convincing. And then we came up with a classical algorithm that's come and attack it. And so, this has opened up some avenues also for seeing if there's a way to exploit this classical algorithm that we have. I mean, it's still quasi-polynomial, so, there's a question of how great it is, but it still might be way more useful for doing some things right now than existing.
I think some of the swap test project I Korea and science and the business leader. So we started a team 2 years ago, supported by QSEC, the startup funds. So the swap test is the basic model. The basic model itself is usually invented back in people was because the basic function of the protocol is to compare things. So the answer is they're the same or they're not, and how far apart the state is. You can think of the application that you have a screen of bits and you want to see if they are the same and they're not, or how different they are. You're not doing big value comparison if you code it. And you can process them together. Like you both up the plates and registers and the bonus to the swap test surface, and at the end you can measure them many times for measurements. Test it, then collect the object, but in the end it tells you how it's exactly different or similar of the two states. So that's the basic model. Our project, we start asking more than 2 states and how load up all the states together and then handle them together, and then you can figure out which pair are the same or no. Machine learning or general data, image, or like applications. So we work on it and we start with some 4 states and try to figure out if you can do this. So the core part of the module is this base of C1 case. Basically, it involves 3 qubits. Let's start with qubits, not the register, like small qubit. So it's 3 qubits. Then one of them control the other 2, and the other 2 is the data qubits control. There's the unknown states. And C swap is a really actually a simple command for control qubits. You can function 0 with nothing to your data, and if they're 1, you swap them. That's it. So then in the end, it's the model you create appearance. It's the same if they're 1 answer and they're not, and then you get a different answer. And you could get anything in between that tells you how to do the same. Now we start from the 2 existing module and send it to 4. And then you have to manage to see what is the optimal arrangement for C-swap gates to handle 4 states, which give you 6 pairs, like 6 pairs, and then compare all the pairs. So in that case, actually, you could do exhaustive search and get an answer, and we actually can map it on by hand to get the best answer. And then I will scale it up from there. So you can see now this type of project, it's not really a business project, but we can do it, and we have the science. You have to pick up a really smart way to scale it up with my version. We all know how that works, but it's still at some point you have to come up with some ideas and figure out ways of scale it up to obviously not for some states errors. So that's one thing.
Anybody came up with any questions?
computing the question.
Can you speak up, please? Please speak up.
Yeah, I'm a computer engineering master's student, and my background is more in electronics. I have a little bit catered to the computer science background. Any recommendations for both understand more complexity and algorithm side of things, so I think that I'm a bit about random algorithms and appreciate how that is. You're interested in classical complexity, or I want to learn about random algorithms, but information could also do some background. I mean, I would recommend just looking at any one of the introductory texts on quantum algorithms or quantum computing. I mean, for your background, I know there's some resources directly geared toward computer scientists, which maybe is a better starting point for you than maybe one that's geared more towards a physicist. Let's talk later because I'm not coming up with the name. Maybe Kitaev's book would be a good place to look. I'm not 100. That's a thought.
Maybe I will mention that we do have a list, the quantum computing list that you can sign up for, and you get information about all of the events. You can email the whole group and get recommendations like these. We can email you the link to the paper and the book. We also have a Slack channel, which kind of we didn't use for a while, but it's still active. So we can certainly, if you're interested, we can sign you up for those things. So you can talk to Bangyu or to any of us. Yeah, it's right there. So that you can stay connected, and even if you don't come to the seminars, like you have conflicts, you can get information like the question you asked. Yes.
Okay. So you are talking about qubits. So I'm not an expert in the field, but will two qubits have different amplitude coefficient? That means like will one qubit be more have more probability than another qubits, something like that, because they do have a probability amplitude, right, associated with each case.
So the question is, can one qubit have a different amplitude than another qubit?
Yes,
Can
something
they
like
be different in terms of their probability?
I guess I'm not sure. I mean, it depends on what basis. Yeah, I guess I'm not like every qubit. The probability it has depends upon the basis it's being measured in. That's kind of what's special about it. However, that's not really a helpful response to your question, I think, but I might not be understanding.
You were talking about the superposition. Let's just take one qubit. You could have the kind of zero space as one space and anything in between. So if you write the complex number, you want to have 0 plus the complex number, you want to test 1. So that's the superposition. So those two constants, the complex numbers in front of the test states, that are the amplitudes we're talking about. So if you take the absolute square of that complex number, like each probability, you get either 0 or 1. There's no other number source. So you get 0 or get 1. You start from the superposition states and measure it. And that's the.
So another follow-up question. So in the field of computation, we mainly build the mesh size to deal with the problem, right? So we discretize our problem. So is there a chance that we do not have to do discretization? We just can we do something that we can do the continuous thing, not the discretization at all?
Are you asking practically or?
Yeah, anything works. Anything.
At a
Just something.
practical level, I mean, a quantum computer is going to be built on a circuit, which is going to be a bunch of wires. And
I think he's talking about like discretizing on like mesh methods, right? So if you're solving an equation, you have to have a mesh, but there are meshless methods out there, Vishal. So that's classical technique also, but if you're asking whether quantum computer can help with that, is that your question?
Yeah, would that help?
It's very difficult to say. I mean, in principle, you're solving Schrodinger's equation, continuous in some sense, but the system you're dealing with is discretized because you're dealing with it. So at a practical level, I don't want to say no because you can come up with real world systems that
Another side is if topics can be higher intelligence. So there are two ways to carry your information, right? One is use the basis and the topic as your one, right, as your information. Or you could use the complex numbers I talked about, but that number could vary.
I mean, I agree with that. I'm still just kind of I think there's too many nuances to how you respond to the question.
Well, I probably know a little bit where Vishal's question is coming from because we've working with complicated computational physics models with DFT that require good meshing. And meshing techniques are, they're out there, but there are complications with interpolating between them. So I'm sure that there could be algorithms to be explored on the quantum machine that can help with that eventually. But yeah, it's a little.
Thank you.
We are at 4 o'clock. I don't know from you. What do you say? One last question, or are we done?
One last question.
One last question. Okay. Anybody wants to ask the last question? Well, I had a question, and if you can, just maybe a few words, not too long. I think some maybe they already answered part of it, but any advice you can give to students who are completely naive and don't know anything about quantum computing and they are amazing already, what can they do to learn more, to engage with our center, with our group, or in general learn about it?
So my first answer maybe like Michael is being forced cross-listed in the math department in some people. So if you would like to learn about quantum mechanics, it's the best courses. We have a global picture about this area and the algorithm technique, not algorithm technique, like the quantum algorithm tricks that you can use in order to define a
Or means course. There are 2 courses.
yeah, means
Slightly
course,
different. Yeah.
the means course is offering the physics like that.
Yes, another thing you could think is you don't want to go to class if you don't have time to learning quantum algorithms. So they have a full round of lectures and accompanied with the so you could start with there and you can get the hands-on experience with there. Not only they're teaching the basics and the algorithm start thinking from the perspective of gates and quantum circuits, and along the way do our little projects with them. So that's another thing you could do.
Also, I guess I should just say, probably everyone here is performing some research. If you wanted to get involved in research, probably the first word of advice that I have is you shouldn't be scared of quantum if you don't know. It's actually, the barrier to entry is not quite as high as the word quantum maybe indicates, right? Like, if you understand some linear algebra, there's a research project for you. And I can't tell you who's sitting here or Wei Wen, wherever he's sitting, or, what else would be the appropriate person to talk to based on your background, your interests, whatever. But the point is, wherever you're coming from, you know, the common language of all this stuff is linear algebra. You've got that basic bit, you're probably ready to get started on some research and interest. That's, you know.
Yeah, I'll just add that there are two people in this room who haven't talked much, but who are the ones to thank for a lot of things that are happening at Mason regarding quantum. One of them is right there, Patrick Flora. He, as the director of the QSEC Center, has been spearheading all of the efforts that we're talking about here today. And from you, who's also been an assistant director for a while and has helped build a lot of the infrastructures for us that we're enjoying as part of the center. And just to say, from my perspective, Mason is quite unique in quantum because we have really a group of people interested in talking to each other, although they come from very different disciplines. So there are people in math and, as you can see, physics and CS, but there are also people in chemistry and engineering, and some people do experiments, some people do theory, and we want to connect and talk to each other, which is not the case in other places. So it's a good opportunity for you. So please, you know, consider joining, consider interacting with us in some shape or form. Consider signing up for classes if you have ability to do that. But we'll wrap up the fireside chat with this, and thank you so much. Thank you for your attention and questions. I don't know what's next, so